Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is listening and joined the webinar. Last time we discussed about the peptic ulcer disease. Now we will discuss about the complications of the peptic ulcer disease and complications of surgeries related to the peptic ulcer disease. So, there are a lot of complications of the gastric peptic ulcer disease. There are two types of peptic ulcer, gastric and duodenal ulcer. So, first of all, we'll discuss about the complications of the gastric ulcer. Most common is intractability or non-healing of the ulcer, and there are a lot of complications: hourglass contracture, teapot deformity, or handbag deformity. We'll discuss in the next slide. Bleeding is the most common complication of the peptic ulcer disease. In gastric ulcer, it is due to erosion of the left gastric or splenic vessels. Anterior ulcers are usually perforates, which is the most common complication of the gastric ulcer, and posterior ulcers of the stomach leads to the bleeding. And penetration is one of the complication. Anteriorly, it may penetrate into the liver, and posteriorly, it may penetrate to the pancreas. And there may be conversion of the gastric ulcer into the adenocarcinoma of the stomach. 5 to 10% chances that gastric ulcer may transform into the malignancy. So, first one is hourglass contracture. Hourglass, it is due to the cicatricial contracture of the lesser curve ulcer. At lesser curve, due to healing of the ulcer, the stomach will be divided into the two compartments. One will be the proximal compartment and one will be the distal compartment, and there will be the narrowing in between the two compartments. So from proximal compartment, there will be no passage of the food into the distal compartment. So patient will present as projectile vomiting, persistent upper abdominal pain, loss of appetite, and so there will be the loss of weight, and there will be no intermittent healing of the ulcer. So there will be the loss of periodicity. So in this slide, you can see there is one proximal and one distal compartment, and there is contracture narrowing in between the two compartments due to the healing of the ulcer. So in this barium meal X-ray, you can see the proximal and distal compartment, and this is looking like a hourglass. So its diagnosis is made by barium meal, in which we can see the two pouches. One is the proximal and one is the distal pouch, and there is the proximal segment filling, and sometimes there will be absence of the barium meal into the distal segment, and it is treated with the distal segment is resected. So it means partial gastrectomy with Billroth 1. What is Billroth 1? Billroth 1 is anastomosis of the remaining stomach to the duodenum. So it is gastroduodenal anastomosis. So treatment will be the partial gastrectomy with Billroth 1 anastomosis, gastroduodenal anastomosis. So another complication is teapot deformity. The stomach will be look like a teapot. So it is also known as handbag stomach because its resemblance, it looks like a handbag. It is also due to the healing of the ulcer at the lesser curvature. So lesser curvature will be shortened. So stomach will be like a pouch, like a handbag or teapot. So stomach capacity will decrease, so the content will not go forward. So it will present with features of pyloric stenosis or gastric outlet obstruction. Obstruction. There will be obstruction in the passage of the content from the stomach. So we will discuss about the gastric outlet obstruction later on. So its treatment is also partial gastrectomy with Billroth 1 anastomosis. We will dissect the stomach with ulcer area, and we will anastomose the remaining stomach to the duodenum. So partial gastrectomy with Billroth 1 anastomosis. So bleeding is the most common complication of the peptic ulcer. It presents with hematemesis or melena, and there may be signs of shock like tachycardia, hypotension, and most of the cases of bleeding from peptic ulcers resolve spontaneously, like 75% cases. And some patients which doesn't resolve spontaneously, they need surgical intervention. Like in type 1 gastric ulcers, type 1 gastric ulcers which are nearer the lesser curvature. So we will dissect the ulcer and dissect the distal part of the stomach. So distal gastrectomy, then gastroduodenostomy or gastrojejunostomy is the treatment. And for type 2 and 3 ulcers, type 2 is one is pre-pyloric in type 2 and with duodenum, and third is in the body. So, and type 2 and 3 ulcers, this treatment is truncal vagotomy. Truncal vagotomy means the trunk of the vagus at the cardia of the stomach is divided, both anterior and posterior trunks of the vagus, and there will be the enterectomy. Enterectomy to facilitate the drainage procedure, because if we cut the vagus at the trunk, so there will be no fibers supplying to the antrum, so there will be no gastric emptying. So to empty the stomach, we do enterectomy and gastrojejuno anastomosis. So treatment will be the truncal vagotomy with enterectomy. And there is 5 to 10% chances that gastric ulcer may transform into the adenocarcinoma of the stomach. In this picture we can see the in left one is the stomach and malignancy, and in this right picture endoscopic view, and this is the ulcer malignancy of the stomach. So now we'll discuss about the complications of the duodenal ulcer. So gastric outlet obstruction is the rare complication, but it is an important complication of the gastric and duodenal ulcer. And second is perforation and bleeding. They are the important complications. Gastric outlet obstruction is most commonly due to the carcinoma of the stomach, but in case of duodenal ulcer, it is due to the healing of a chronic duodenal ulcer. So when there will be healing at the first part of the duodenum, so site will be at the first part of the duodenum. So first part of the duodenum will be, there will be the narrowing of the lumen, so the pylorus part will be the stenosis. So proximal part of the stomach will be dilated, so proximally there will be the distended stomach, so content of the stomach will not go into the duodenum, so it will leads to the gastric outlet obstruction. So it will present as severe persistent epigastric pain and with feeling of fullness. Patient will complain कि उसको खाना नहीं खाया जाता, थोड़ा सा खाना खाने के बाद पेट फुल हो जाता है. सो अर्ली सेटाइटी एंड ब्लोटिंग, एपिगैस्ट्रिक फुलनेस की कंप्लेन करेगा पेशेंट. एंड देयर विल बी द वोमिटिंग विल बी लार्ज क्वांटिटी, प्रोजेक्टाइल, and it will have partially digested or undigested particles of previous meals, and it will be non-bilious, because due to the obstruction bile will not come into the stomach. So patient will present with projectile non-bilious vomiting which is having foul smell and having partially undigested or particles of the previous meal. So there will be the loss of the periodicity. There will be no healing of the ulcer in between. So patient will take less meals. So there will be the capacity of the stomach loss. So there will be the loss of appetite. So that will leads to the loss of the weight. So patient will be weak or cachexic. So in this picture, we can see there is the narrowing of stenosis at the pylorus, the first part of duodenum. There is healing of the ulcer at the first part of duodenum. In the left lower corner, there is the picture is showing that there is narrowing of the lumen of the
तो तेरी दीदा ना अपनी
sorry for interruption. So in the left lower corner, the picture is showing there is a narrowing of the lumen of the uh, pylorus part on the first part of duodenum. So there is the proximal dilatation of the stomach. So the contents of the stomach are not going into the duodenum. So it will lead to the gastric outlet obstruction. So it is on examination, patient will have the features of the shock and dehydration like shrunken eyes, dry tongue, feeble and rapid pulse, tachycardia, tachypnea, and extremities will be dry. And patient will complain of a rolling mass. The in stomach, peristalsis goes from left to the right. So due to the obstruction of at the pylorus stenosis, the stomach will be dilated, though the peristaltic waves from the left to right. The patient will complain as rolling mass which presses under the palpating fingers. The patient will complain of rolling mass in the upper abdomen which goes from left to the right. So this is the visible gastric peristalsis. If this occur in case of large bowel obstruction, there will be the visible peristalsis from the right to the left, or in case of small bowel obstruction there will be the peristalsis like step ladder pattern. So we can examine the patient, we can do succussion splash. Succussion splash means the patient is given liquid diet 4 hours before the examination, and we put a stethoscope over the epigastric region, and we shake the patient by holding the patient with both lower both sides of the hypochondrium. So we put a stethoscope in the epigastric region and we will hold the patient and stethoscope. We will hold the stethoscope by both the thumbs, and fingers will hold the patient both hypochondrium, and then we shake the patient sideways. So there will be the splashing sound of the liquid. So this is succussion splash. It is because the liquid content of the food particles will not go into the duodenum. So the liquid contents will be there in the stomach. So on shaking, it will produce a splashing sound. So it is the characteristic of the gastric outlet obstruction. And on auscultopercussion, we put the stethoscope in the epigastric region and we start scratching from center to the periphery from the left side of the abdomen or from the left hypochondrium. And on scratching, due to the distension of the stomach, there will be the resonant sound, and when the stomach boundaries are over, then there will be the dullness. So we mark the point where the resonance diminishes. So वहां तक हम मार्क करेंगे जहां तक स्टमक में स्टेथोस्कोप से हमें रेजोनेंस सुनाई देता है. So we will mark points from left to the right side. So it will mark the greater curvature of the stomach. So from the left side to the right side, we come to the right side of the umbilicus. So it will mark the greater curvature of the stomach. Usually greater curvature of the stomach lies above the level of umbilicus. But if there is chronic duodenal ulcer, due to the chronic ulceration, there will be the dilatation of the stomach, and due to chronicity, there is a enormous dilatation of the stomach. So it will be greater curvature of the stomach will lie below the umbilicus. In case of in case of malignancy or short duration disease, the stomach will not be dilated so much, so it will not below the umbilicus. But in case of chronic duodenal ulcer, stomach will lie, greater curvature of the stomach will lie below the umbilicus. So in auscultopercussion, we mark the boundary of the greater curvature. So a patient will have confused status due to the loss of electrolytes. So the most common abnormality in gastric outlet obstruction is hypochloremic, hyponatremic, hypokalemic, hypomagnesic metabolic alkalosis with paradoxical aciduria. How this occurs? When the patient having chronic gastric outlet obstruction, so the patient will present other severe, repeated, frequent vomiting after each meal. So in each vomiting, there will be the loss of hydrogen ion, chloride ion, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. So, due to chronic loss of these ions, the patient will have uh, hypochloremic, there will be low potassium, low sodium, and low hydrogen. So, the patient will go into the metabolic alkalosis. Usually, body try to compensate, but due to it is due to the chronicity and the continuous loss of these electrolytes, the kidney try to compensate this metabolic alkalosis. So kidney excretes bicarbonate to compensate metabolic alkalosis. Usually kidney secretes sodium with bicarbonates, but there is already hyponatremia. So to compensate the sodium, to retention of the sodium, kidney will lose the hydrogen ion in the urine with bicarbonate. So urine will be acidic. Usually urine will not be acidic, but here there is already loss of sodium. So to compensate the sodium, there will be the loss of hydrogen ion. So the patient will have paradoxical aciduria. So electrolyte abnormality will be hypochloremic, hyponatremic, hypokalemic, hypomagnesic, metabolic alkalosis with paradoxical aciduria. With metabolic alkalosis, there is loss of ionized, there is decreased absorption of the calcium. So there will be the loss of low ionized calcium. So patient may present with features of hypocalcemia or gastric tetany. So these investigations too for gastric outlet obstruction is the barium meal study. In this, we can see that there will be the absence of the duodenal cap, the stomach will be the dilated, and due to the food particles, there will be the mottling appearance, and there will be no barium in the duodenum. And upper GI endoscopy can be done to see the lumen narrowing and to see any growth or any signs of malignancy. And electrolyte studies, there will be low sodium, potassium, hydrogen, chloride, and ECG, there will be the changes in the ECG due to the hypokalemia. And there is one test, saline load test. We In saline load test, we put 750 milliliter of the saline into the patient's stomach. We put a nasogastric tube, NG tube, and we instill 750 ml of normal saline in the patient abdomen in the sitting position, and after 4 hours we aspirate the saline. If it is less than 200 ml, it is normal. Normally all of the saline will go into the duodenum, but if it is more than 400 ml, means there is gastric outlet obstruction, saline is not going into the duodenum. So this identifies gastric outlet obstruction. So how gastric outlet is managed? And first of all, patient will be dehydrated and there will be dyselectrolyemia. So correction of the dehydration with infusion of the saline, ringer lactate, and mainly double strength normal saline with potassium chloride and electrolytes like potassium chloride, calcium is are given, and patient is weak cachexic, so total parenteral nutrition is given, and stomach is washed using normal saline, and it reduces edema and improves the gastric emptying. So, if the patient doesn't resolve with this after 48 to 72 hours, if the patient condition is stabilized, then we plan for the surgery. Surgery is truncal vagotomy. Vagus is divided at trunk with enterectomy and antrum is removed. This is the ideal procedure. We can do highly selective vagotomy by preserving the fibers of the celiac or hepatic, and rest of the vagus is divided, and gastrojejunostomy as a part of drainage procedure can be done, or truncal vagotomy with gastrojejunostomy if there is an inflammation of the duodenal valve. If the duodenal valve is inflamed, it cannot be anastomosis to the stomach, then truncal vagotomy with gastrojejunostomy can be done. So next complication is perforation of the peptic ulcer. In gastric ulcer, the most common site is lesser curve. So the most common location is near the lesser curve. But most of the common cause of perforation in gastric ulcer is malignancy. So we should suspect malignancy in each and every case of gastric ulcer unless until proven otherwise. So biopsy at time of laparotomy from the ulcer edge is must to rule out malignancy, and gastric ulcers have high mortality and treatment is primary closure, gram space repair, or ideally we should do distal gastrectomy including the ulcer area and gastrojejunostomy. In this picture we can see there is the perforation in the stomach or duodenum. The perforated duodenal ulcer is usually common in males, and anterior ulcer perforates, and posterior ulcers bleeds, and there will be history of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, alcohol, steroids, H. pylori infection. They have 10% mortality. So there are three stages of the perforation. First, after perforation, in the first stage, there will be the leakage of the bilious content and food particles into the peritoneal cavity. So this bilious and food particle content will irritate the peritoneum. So there will be the peritonitis. So patient will present as the sudden severe pain in the upper part of the abdomen, which later on the fluid trickles down through the right paracolic gutter. So pain will be the right upper abdomen, then into the right lower abdomen, and it may goes to the right iliac fossa, so it may mimic appendicitis, or then fluid may go into the pelvis. So there will be the pain in the lower abdomen. So later on there will be the generalized peritonitis. So patient will present with the sudden severe pain in the abdomen that may lead to generalized peritonitis due to the irritation by the bile and food particles. So this stage lasts for the 4 to 5 hours. After that, the peritoneum secretes lot of fluids to compensate that as a body's defense mechanism. So this is stage of reaction or stage of illusion. Why illusion? Because there is due to the loss of lot of fluid, there will be the dilution of the bilious content. So the patient will feel good. So there will be the less pain. So there is the patient will feel that pain has resolved, but the condition has not resolved yet. It is the stage of illusion, stage of reaction due to the peritoneal secretion of the fluid. And later on, after 6 to 10 hours, there will be migration of the bacteria from the gut into the peritoneal cavity. So there will be the diffuse bacterial peritonitis. Then patient will present with the features of generalized peritonitis and features of septicemia, infection. So how will patient present with toxic phase or Hippocratic phase? Hippocratic phase is the last stage in which patient will have dry face, sunken eyes, dry tongue, and weak and pulse, and there will be the features of shock, dehydration, tachycardia, tachypnea, and cold peripheries. And due to the perforation, there will be the distension of the abdomen, and there will be the sudden and severe persistent pain in the abdomen, which start from the epigastric region, then at the right side of abdomen, then becomes generalized. So on palpation, there will be the generalized tenderness and rebound tenderness, which is known as Bloomberg sign. So patient abdomen will be silent. Patient will not try to move, because moving or any movement or sideways movement which will lead to the pain in the abdomen. So patient will not move. So it will be silent abdomen. And on examination, due to the seepage of the gas from bowel, there will be usually there will be liver dullness in the ninth and 10th intercostal space, but on percussion in perforation there will be the obliteration of the liver dullness, which is a sign of perforation of the bowel. So it is managed by investigation is the common and best investigation is chest x-ray, anterior posterior view with abdomen in erect posture. It will show the gas under both domes of the diaphragm, and if there is any query, we can go for ultrasound abdomen. It will show the free fluid and gas, and to rule out any other possibility of the pain abdomen like pancreatitis. So if there are no free fluid or gas, because only in 70% of the cases there will be a free gas, because there should be at least 1 milliliter of the gas in the peritoneal cavity to detect in the X-ray. So sometimes in 30% of the cases there will be no gas under diaphragm, so we can go for the CT scan to rule out other pathologies, so CT can detect about the perforation. So in this common investigation chest X-ray with abdomen AP erect view, here you can see that usually there are three gas shadows. One is the left hypochondrium, it is the gastric fundal gas. Second is duodenal bulb. Third at the ileocecal junction. But in both pictures there is also gas under the right dome of the diaphragm. So in both pictures you can see there are concentric shape gas shadow under both the domes of the diaphragm, which is the hallmark of the any bowel perforation. So it is treated. The patient is admitted in the emergency, and it it is resuscitated with IV fluids, normal saline, and blood transfusion, broad spectrum antibiotics like cephalosporins, aminoglycosides, and imidazoles, metronidazole, and Riles tube to decrease the gastric distension, and Foley catheterization to see the hydration status and to measuring the urine output. And patient after stabilization, patient is planned for emergency laparotomy from the midline incision. So we will wash all the content, bilious and food particles and fecal matters, and with normal saline, warm normal saline, and after thorough peritoneal lavage, after cleaning of the peritoneal cavity, we will repair the ulcer site. The most common the treatment is Grams patch repair. We put a after Grams patch repair or modified Grams patch repair. In Grams patch repair, we put a patch of the omentum over the ulcer, and we will close with Vicryl number 1 sutures. In modified ground space repair, we first primary repair the ulcer, and we put a patch of the omentum, then again suture it. So this is the treatment, and in post op there is supplementation of the H. pylori treatment or pento PPIs and proton pump inhibitors for 6 to 12 weeks. In this picture, the first one is uh, the ulcer is closed primarily, and a patch of the omentum is put over there. This is the modified Graham's patch repair for gastric or duodenal perforations. So bleeding duodenal ulcer, the predisposing factors are alcohol, smoking, and NSAID. And in duodenal ulcer, usually posterior ulcers bleeds. It is due to the erosion into the gastroduodenal artery, which leads to the severe bleeding. And sometimes there is due to sloughing of the ulcer from small vessels that may lead to the bleeding. So it is assessed by the Forest classification. In Forest classification, there are three grades, 1, 2, and 3. And one is divided into 1A and B. In 1, there will be the active bleeding. In 1A is the active pulsatile bleeding. 1B is active non-pulsatile bleeding. In grade 2, there are three parts, 2A, 2B, and 2C. In 2B, there will be no active bleeding, but there will be the visible blood vessels. In 2B, there will be a blackened clot, and in 2C, there will be the clear ulcer, and in 3, there will be the no active bleeding and there will be ulceration. So in stage 1 and 2A, there are high risk of rebleeding or profuse bleeding, and stage 2B, there are medium risk, and stage 3, there are low risk of, and stage 2C or 3, there are low risk of bleeding. So it is assessed by Forest classification. It is present with hematemesis melena, features of shock, pain and tenderness in the epigastric region. It is diagnosed with upper GI endoscopy, and treatment is IV fluids, plasma expander, blood transfusion, and stomach wash with 1 into 2 lakh ratio adrenaline. It will stop the bleeding, and IV pantoprazole or IV ranitidine is given. And there are endoscopic interventions can be done. The endoscopic sclerotherapy, and the sclerosant agents are used like ethanolamine oleate or distilled water, it leads to the vasoconstriction, sclerosis, and tamponade effect. There are three mechanisms: vasoconstriction, tamponade, and sclerosis, by which sclerosant agents leads to the stopping of the bleeding, and it is the most effective method. We can take endoscopic cauterization using bipolar
देखा है कौन कॉल भी कौन
stent,
देख के कॉल करनी दुकान थी
NDY
हाँ मैं जा रहा हूँ
laser,
फिर उनकी यार
and we can try angiographic embolization of the gastroduodenal artery, or we can place endoscopic hemoclips in the ulcer.
प्लीज इनके बताओ
That,
भाई चाबी भी ना चल चाबी भी ना ले जा
अरे यार कौन बोल रहा है, थोड़ा चुप हो जाओ. And we can, if these all measures don't work, we can go for laparotomy, and underrunning of the bleeding area can be done, and later on H. pylori
आएगा ही
treatment
लगा
for 6 to 12 weeks can be given
आएगा लगा
and should be given.
हाँ उल्टो तो आएगा नहीं
Sometimes there are intractable
उल्टो तो
peptic
आएगा नहीं
ulcers which fails to
बस
heal
तो
after an initial trial of 8 to 12 weeks of PPIs or H. pylori treatment, or which relapse after therapy has been stopped. So there are surgeries which are for intractable peptic ulcer disease. I have already told to you. This is truncal vagotomy, selective vagotomy, highly selective vagotomy, with or without enterectomy. Here in this picture, we can see the vagus nerve anterior and posterior fibers, and it is divided. Left is anterior, right is posterior. So mnemonic is LAR. So it will posteriorly it give the fibers cranial nerve of Grassi, and it give branches to the parietal branches and give to the, this is antrum like a crow foot. So vagus is divided anterior posterior, so it gives branches to the fundus body and into the parietal fibers and to the antrum. So in vagotomy there are different levels. In the first truncal there is a trunk of the anterior and posterior vagus are divided. So all the branches of the vagus are cut. So there will be the needed of the drainage procedure, because fibers of the antrum also cut down. So there will be the delayed gastric emptying. So to prevent this, there is selective gastrectomy, selective vagotomy. Here we divide the vagus fibers by preserving fibers of the hepatic or celiac plexus, and in highly selective vagotomy, we just cut the fibers of the parietal cells, which supplies to the parietal cells or body of the stomach, so which secretes the HCl. So we just divide the fibers which are supplying to the parietal cells. We don't divide the fibers supplying to the antrum. So only highly selective vagotomy is the sufficient. So in truncal vagotomy is the most common procedure done for the duodenal ulcers. Here the trunk of the vagus is divided, so there will be the need of the drainage procedure. So truncal vagotomy with gastrojejunostomy or gastroduodenostomy. In selective vagotomy, we safeguard the branches of the hepatic or celiac, and in parietal cell vagotomy or highly selective vagotomy, just fibers of the parietals which are supplying to the parietal cells are divided. So here there is no need of drainage procedure. So there are two procedures for gastric surgeries, which we were talking in between. First one is Billroth 1 and Billroth 2. In Billroth 1, after dividing the disease part, the stomach is anastomosed to the duodenum. So in Billroth 1, there is gastroduodenal anastomosis, and if duodenum length is small or duodenum can not be anastomosed to the stomach due to inflammation or scarring, so loop of the jejunum is anastomosed to the remaining part of the stomach. This is Billroth 2 anastomosis. So, and in this procedure, this is in the figure A, there is gastroduodenal anastomosis. In figure B, the stump of the duodenum is closed and loop of the jejunum is anastomosed to the remaining stomach. So this is the type 2 Billroth anastomosis. So in this picture, you see this is rho and Y anastomosis. Here the stump of the duodenum is closed, and 50 centimeter from DJ there is, we divide the jejunum, and the jejunum is brought upwards through the transverse colon mesocolon window, and it is anastomosed to the stomach. So there will be the gastrojejunal anastomosis. First is gastrojejunal anastomosis, then there is closure of the stump of the duodenum. And to maintain the continuity of the pancreatic and bilious secretion, the remaining part of the jejunum is anastomosed as a Y limb to the at 50 centimeter from the proximal anastomosis. Means from gastrojejunal anastomosis, from the 50 centimeter, we will anastomose the remaining part of the jejunum. So this will be the Rowan Y anastomosis, gastrojejunostomy. So there are complications of this Billroth 1 and Billroth 2 surgeries, mostly due to the Billroth 2 means after gastrojejunostomy. So most common and early complication is hemorrhage. There will be bleeding at the anastomosis site or due to the injury to the blood vessels. There may be anastomotic leak. There is leakage of the anastomosis and stomal obstruction, duodenal blowout, recurrent ulcerations, small stomach syndrome, bile vomiting, and dumping syndrome, early and late dumping, and post-vagotomy diarrhea, malignant transformation, nutritional consequences, gallstone. The most common complication is metabolic. Mostly is due to the decreased absorption or decreased intake of the iron. So the most common is anemia, and in which most common is iron deficiency anemia. There is also loss of intrinsic factors, so there will be the loss of vitamin B12, so there will be the megaloblastic anemia, also folate deficiency, or there will be the decreased fat absorption, so there will be the loss of fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, K. So these complications occurs most commonly after Billroth 2 surgery. And now stomal obstruction, if we do gastrojejuno anastomosis, so in the loop gastrojejuno anastomosis, there may be mucosal edema due to edema of the mucosa, or there is obstruction of the efferent loop, or there is hypertrophy of the mucosa of the stoma, or there is retrograde jejunogastric intussusception. Due to intussusception, there is stomal obstruction, so the content will not go downwards. And this is the dreaded complication, very serious complication after Billroth 2 surgery. It usually occurs on the fourth or fifth postoperative day. It is due to either due to the efferent loop block, or there may be distal obstruction of the efferent loop, or there may be improper closure of the duodenal stump, or there is a small duodenal stump which is not closed perfectly, or there is inflammation or contents of the efferent, by which these all problems due to the distal obstruction or efferent loop block, there will be the content in the efferent loop, in the proximal loop, in the duodenal part. So these contents will not have a free flow, so there will be increase in the pressure in the duodenum. So due to the increase in the pressure, there will be blow out of the anastomosis or the closure of the duodenum, so there will be the leakage of bilious content and into the peritoneal cavity. Also, if we are giving putting a drain in the during the laparotomy, so from the drain there will be continuous duodenal fistula which will have bilious content. So patient will present with severe sudden pain, and there will be duodenal bilious fistula and features of the biliary peritonitis. So it is managed by NG tube, Ryle's tube is aspiration, IV fluids are given, antibiotics, and total vital nutrition are given. And once the patient is stabilized, then we can plan for surgery, afferent and efferent. We can connect both afferent and efferent loops to decrease the pressure in the afferent loop, in the duodenal loop. So both afferent efferent loops are anastomosed to the each other, and or we can relieve the distal obstruction if there is, and we can put close the duodenal stump, and stomach serosal patch can be put over the duodenum, and we can put a tube into the duodenum which to make it a controlled duodenal fistula which will heal with time, and later on we can remove the tube and it is managed accordingly, and it will take time to heal. So sometimes there are recurrent ulcerations. Most common Sites are after highly selective vagotomy. There is in the first part of the duodenum. After gastrojejunostomy, there will be the ulceration at the jejunal site because jejunal mucosa is more sensitive to the acid, and it occurs after both Billroth 1 and 2 anastomosis. So most common presentation will the severe persistent pain in abdomen. There may be hematemesis or melena. The risk factors are due to the technically inadequate operation, cigarette smoking, refractory ulcers, alcohol smoking, NSAID, or gastrectomy without vagotomy because there will be the acid secretion. So there will be the recurrent ulceration at the stoma site. It may lead to the bleeding, perforation, and treatment is done by completion of the vagotomy. Vagotomy is done to decrease the acid secretion and Rho and Y anastomosis, which I told you in the previous slides. So it this recurrent ulcer may leads to the complication of the gastrojejunal anastomosis. The ulcer may penetrates in from gastrojejunum to the transverse colon. So there will be the gastrojejunocolic fistula. So the content will go directly from stomach to jejunum to the colon. So patient will have profuse diarrhea. So there will be the loss of decreased absorption. There will be the metabolic loss of electrolytes. The patient will be the weak, thin, cachexic. So it usually occur after below to gastrojejunal anastomosis. There will be the gastrojejunocolic fistula. So it will present with severe diarrhea after every meal because the meal will go directly, content will go directly into the colon. So patient will have frequent diarrhea, which will be severe, and patient will, due to the colon, there are lot of bacteria. So the in colon the content is feculent. So patient through jejunal or gastric stoma, there will be the false swelling from the mouth. There will be the fecal smell from the mouth, and there will the patient generalized weakness due to the nutrition or electrolyte losses. So this is the triad Marshall, Nudd, and Hansen triad of diarrhea, fecal breath, and weakness. And it is investigated by the barium enema, which is the diagnostic 95 to 100% diagnostic. And if barium enema is not sufficient, we can plan for CT scan, upper GI endoscopy, or lower GI endoscopy, or barium meal. And it is treated by correction of the dehydration and malnutrition and the stage 1 or 2 procedure. In stage 1 procedure, we dissect the stomach, jejunum, and colon, and we will re-anastomose and maintain the continuity. Or in two-stage procedure, first of all, we dissect the fistula, then we made a colostomy, and later on the colostomy is closed on the second stage operation. So first is dissection of the fistula and closing and making a colostomy, and later on closing of the colostomy. So one or two stage procedures can be done. So this is also complication small stomach syndrome after gastrojejunostomy or after gastrectomy. There is capacity of the stomach is decreased, so patient will have early satiety due to the reduction in the size of stomach. And in highly selective vagotomy, there will be the loss of receptive relaxation, and it improves with time and doesn't need any revisional surgery. This is also one of the complications of bilious vomiting after any form of vagotomy without drainage or gastrectomy procedure. It is precipitated by the eating, and eating leads to the pain and reflux symptoms, and patient will have vomiting mix of food and bile. It is treated by Roux-en-Y diversion, or gastrojejunostomy is taken down, or pyloroplasty can be done. So this is also a common complication, dumping syndrome. Dumping means to dump the content, means accelerated emptying. So in dumping syndrome, it is also is a type of postprandial symptom. Means after eating, there is accelerated emptying of the content of the food particles or dumping of the food particles which are having hyperosmolar content. So hyperosmolar content of the stomach after eating will directly dumped into the small intestine. That will leads to the dumping syndrome. It is of early or dumping. It is 10% incidence. It occur after below 2 after gastrojejunectomy or after gastrectomy or vagotomy and drainage procedure. In it, symptoms are mainly abdominal or vasomotor symptoms. It is mechanism is small bowel is filled with foodstuffs from the stomach which has high osmolar content. There is high osmotic load. So when high osmolar content from the stomach goes into the small bowel, there is sequestration of the fluid from the circulation into the gastrointestinal tract. So the patient will have features of the shock or vasomotor symptoms. While in late dumping, which is 5%, it is due to the after it occurs after 2 hours after when the carbohydrate load in the stomach from the stomach it goes into the small intestine. So there will be the hyperglycemia. So there will be the reactive hyperinsulin. So there will increase in the insulin to decrease the increase sugar. So there is reactive hyperinsulinemia, which leads to the decrease in the sugar content, decrease in the glucose. So there will be secondary hypoglycemia. In this table, this is an important table. Early and late dumping syndrome incidence is 10% early and 5% late. In relation to the meals, it occurs immediately after meals in early dumping. Late dumping occur after 2 hours after meal. It both lasts for 30 to 40 minutes. And in early dumping syndrome, due to the hyperosmolar or hyperosmolar high carbohydrate content when goes from stomach to small intestine, so fluid sequestered from the circulation into the gut. So there will be the vasomotor symptoms. So it will lead to the epigastric fullness, sweating, lightheadedness, tachycardia, and diarrhea. So it is relieved by lying down and normal saline infusion. And in late dumping syndrome, it occur after 2 hours as high glucose leads to the increased secretion of insulin, which leads to the secondary hypoglycemia. So the features of the hypoglycemia, like tremors and faintness, occurs. It is aggravated by exercise and relieved by food and sugar in or dextrose infusion. So treatment for both are same. First is dietary manipulation. Multiple small diets are given, which are having low carbohydrate content and which are having high protein and fat content. And to decrease secretion, we can give somatostatin analog like octreotides injections subcutaneously before meals. And revisional surgeries can be done like Rowan by anastomosis or conversion of the gastrojejunostomy to gastroduodenostomy. Thank you. So our topic of complication of peptic ulcer disease is complete. So thank you so much.